The morning heat in Kuruma rises off the asphalt in small shivers, and the traffic learns to breathe around the old man at the roundabout. He sits under a dented billboard advertising a mobile wallet he cannot use, one palm extended, the other pressed to his ribs as if to hold his breath in. People know him as Baba Salif. They say he came from the river villages when the rains failed, that he once taught numbers to children before his eyesight clouded and his legs forgot the long walk. He wears a frayed cap and a coat that has lost its color the way a photograph fades. His bowl is a rusted tomato tin, and the sound of coins inside it is a language that never finishes a sentence. That morning his chest is wheezing. The first wound is simple and visible. Every inhale sounds like a gate scraping open. Every exhale, like it cannot close. Across the road, a woman in a lemon scarf buys bread and hesitates. She glances at the clinic's painted door, white, chipped at the edges, a door that means relief if it will open. The triage desk inside is clean and calm and ruled by small papers stamped with numbers. A sign above the queue says, in polite blue letters, insurance card or cash voucher required before consultation. People finger their documents like talismans. A boy coughs and is waved forward because his mother has what the clerk needs to see. The clerk's badge says, Adama. He likes his ledger balanced at the end of the day, the columns neat, the receipts stapled to the right page. He did not invent the rule. It is his job to hold the line. When a taxi driver lifts Baba Salif under the arms and half carries him to the clinic door, the room tilts with a quiet attention. The breath scrape is louder here. Nurse Awa looks up from a child's dressing and wipes her hands as she walks. She hears the sound of a gate and thinks of air. The clerk greets them with a sympathetic look that stops at the counter. He taps the sign with a pen to save his voice. The taxi driver shakes his head, no voucher, no card, and pats his pockets as if money might appear out of air if he performs the ritual with enough sincerity. The old man's eyes water. Awa can feel a clock start that no one has named. She asks to take his vitals while they sort the payment. The clerk's pen pauses, then writes a note in the margin of the ledger, as if to warn the paper that a rule might bend. The head administrator steps from his glass office, tie-pinned, smile prepared. He is called Monsieur Ndala, and the veneer of his calm is part of the architecture. He glances once at the ledger, once at the sign, once at the old man. He speaks gently about procedures, about the backlog from last week's free day, about what the auditors will say if pages are out of order. In the hallway, the door to the supply room watches with its small metal eye. We cannot start care without a funding source, he says, and the sentence lands like a seal pressed on soft wax. The taxi driver looks back toward the roundabout where the city moves, as if it cannot be embarrassed. Baba Salif's breath rattles. Awa slips a pulse oximeter onto his finger anyway, like someone turning a key inside a lock she hopes will fit. Beyond the clinic, the city council meets in a long room where microphones blink patiently. In another neighborhood, a minister's motorcade glides past a market where women arrange tomatoes by color until the table looks like a disciplined sunset. In the central compound, the leader arrives without sirens. People call him Ibrahim, though titles cling to him in the papers. He is the kind who speaks softly and carries a notebook instead of a flag. He will pass a gate that is not yet a story, a door that is not yet open, a ledger that has not yet confessed. For now, the heat rises, and the old beggar's breath saws at the air. And the city pretends not to hear until the sound plants itself in everyone's chest. The moment waits. The forward pull is the simplest thing. A man cannot breathe. A door will not open. A rule will soon meet its purpose. What begins as a negotiation at the counter becomes a choreography of hesitation. The clerk, Adama, flips the ledger to today's page, the paper still smelling faintly of glue. He draws a line where a voucher number should go and leaves it blank, then stares at the emptiness as if it is a legal risk. Nurse Awa, with the pulse reading dropping, slides an oxygen concentrator toward the chair and tries to make the plastic tubes look like something provisional, a kindness rather than a violation. The administrator lingers near the glass office, pretending to read a memo, watching the rule hold. Outside, a circle of onlookers forms, the city's gossip antennae quick to assemble, the breadwoman in the lemon scarf, 2 motor riders, an apprentice tailor with chalk on his fingers. Someone films. The camera lens is its own kind of gate. The old man's breath drags the room into its rhythm. When he inhales, everyone waits, and when he exhales, their shoulders drop. The taxi driver offers his national ID, as if identity could be collateral, as if the state could be comfort. Adama shakes his head with an apologetic firmness. He mentions the recent audit, the missing receipts that cost the clinic its small bonus, the instruction from regional accounts that charity must flow through authorized days. Through the glass, a printed email is visible on Ndala's desk, a subject line sharp as a rebuke. Unauthorized disbursements, consequences. Rules calcify when someone has been frightened publicly. The counter becomes stone. Awa leans close to the old man and tells him to breathe slow, counting in a voice that has calmed crying infants and men shaking from fever. She thinks of her training, of the principle that airway before paperwork is not just a slogan. She asks the clerk to record an emergency exception, a phrase she knows will not please the administrator but might live as a technicality. Adama hesitates and writes the words small, like a secret. The administrator steps forward, smooth voice loaded with the weight of compliance. He explains that exceptions invite abuse, that last month a cousin arrived in a borrowed wheelchair and the clinic paid for a scan that was never needed. He does not mention the rumor that a cashier sells vouchers at night behind the pharmacy, that the ledger's neatness is a costume for a hunger everyone pretends to ignore. At the market, word travels on WhatsApp with the speed of indignation. The breadwoman's cousin posts a short video, the old man's chest rising like a stubborn door, the administrator's tie, the sign, the clerk's careful pen. A caption blooms with the city's harsh humor. Breath must queue. Within minutes, the clip lands in a larger group where municipal workers trade news and advice. Someone tags an aide in the central compound, a woman named Miriam, known for her habit of forwarding bad news upward without embroidery. She replies with a question mark, then asks for the clinic name. A second video arrives, a view of the ledger page with the empty line and the small emergency exception note. The camera zooms in on the blank box where a voucher number should live. The city's conscience draws a breath. The old man's eyes find Awa's and hold. He is not pleading. He is measuring the distance between policy and air. Awa lowers the oxygen mask and turns the concentrator on anyway. The hum fills the room with a soft insistence. The administrator opens his mouth to object and closes it again when he sees a child in the corner, watching with a kind of grave admiration. Rules are not theater when a child is learning. Adama's pen taps the counter twice, then writes something braver. Treatment initiated, voucher pending. He adds the time and underlines it. The traffic outside coughs and settles. The crowd's murmur turns from gossip to witness. Somewhere within the compound, a notification lights up on a desk with a simple summary. No one helped the old beggar until someone did. The knot is tied. The next tug will come from a direction that turns procedure into a question everyone must answer out loud. Ibrahim's office is quiet, in the way a drumhead is quiet before the strike. Morning files are stacked like modest mountains. The aide, Miriam, enters without flourishes and places her phone on the table. She plays the clip without commentary. The room fills with the sound that brought strangers to a halt, a breath that sounds like a gate fighting rust. Ibrahim does not move at first. He watches the clerk's hand, the administrator's stance, the sign's prim letters, the oxygen tube coiled like a lifeline waiting to be thrown. He asks one question in a voice that does not rise. Who wrote that rule? Miriam answers with links and dates. The policy traces back to a finance ministry circular meant to stop leakage, to restore discipline in disbursement. It is metastasized into a door that stays closed even when someone is drowning. He stands, takes his notebook, and writes a sentence that he will repeat later until it no longer feels radical. Treat first, bill later. He asks for the driver. They take one vehicle, no convoy, because showing up should not feel like a siege. At the clinic, an argument is almost underway. Awa has placed the oxygen mask. Ndala is mustering the tone that makes subordinates apologize for necessities. Adama is tearing a voucher in half to pretend that proof exists. When the leader walks in, the room does not gasp. It exhales. He is not a spectacle here. He is a weight placed on the right side of a scale. He greets the old man by name, though he has just learned it. He kneels, not performative but practical, speaking at eye level so the voice does not arrive like a command. He asks Awa for the vitals, reads the pulse oximeter like a farmer reads sky. He does not ask for a receipt. His gaze moves to the sign, then the ledger, then the administrator's pinched patience. He takes a pen from his pocket, a simple black thing, and writes on the ledger's margin where a policy can be born in ink and breath. First, breath protocol. Emergency care starts at time of arrival. Funding to follow, Ibrahim. He dates and signs it, a stopgap that is both shield and spear. He instructs Adama to stamp the page. The clerk, relieved to be told to help, does it with an eagerness he tries to hide. Ndala begins to say that authority over finance does not reside here, that audits are unforgiving, that signatures without budget lines are sand. Ibrahim listens, because procedural fear is honest. He takes out his notebook again and dictates to Miriam in a steady rhythm that resists drama. The city will institute a simple rule across all gate services. The first breath protocol. applied at clinics and emergency desks. Treat first, bill later. A central relief fund will reimburse same-day care that meets criteria recorded in a new log. Each event will be time-stamped at the door. The ledger will gain a new column titled Door to Help Minutes. The dashboard, he speaks as if it already exists, will show how long a person waited for care to begin. He looks at Ndala and says the next piece slowly, not to humiliate, but to free. Accountability will move upward. If an auditor comes, let them come to me. He turns to the waiting crowd and apologizes, not grandly. He says the city should never make breath stand in line. He thanks Awa for being impertinent in the right direction. He thanks Adama for being brave enough to write what was true before it was allowed. He tells the administrator that rules serve people, not the other way around, and that the clinic will become the pilot for a fix that has been waiting for a name. He asks the taxi driver to write a short account of how he found the old man and what happened at the door. He asks the breadwoman to send her video to a public channel the city will open before dusk. He speaks as if these wires and lights already run. Awa adjusts the flow and watches Baba Salif's chest settle into a softer path. The gate sound eases. The rumor mill spins in a more generous direction. Ibrahim's presence has reordered the room's oxygen. He stands, presses his palm for a moment to the counter as if to bless the wood into service, and leaves the sign in place. Later, it will be taken down and rehung with a different sentence. For now, a handwritten note taped under it holds. The city has been given a new instruction, not shouted, but engraved into a ledger that people like Adama trust. The intervention is both small and seismic, a sentence, a signature, a line in a book that will teach other hands what to do when a breath stumbles at the door. Interventions are promises. Investigations are their proof. By afternoon, Miriam has a small war room running out of an unused conference space where the paint still smells fresh. On one wall, a screen shows a shared spreadsheet that starts to behave like a living map. Columns stack: clinic name, arrival time, first action time, reason for delay if any, name on duty, voucher number if later obtained, notes. A second screen mirrors a telegram group labeled First Breath Witness Line. Messages arrive like rain, clipped, sometimes angry, often precise. A porter in Zone 3 posts that he was told to keep a stretcher in a hallway until a relative paid for gloves. A teacher describes the school nurse sending a child home because the fee for the bandage fund was in arrears. The pattern is not a secret. It is a habit that no one had named until it made a sound loud enough to shame. Miriam's team pulls policies from drawers that have not been opened since the last drought. Circulars, memos, interim measures. They find the finance directive that birthed the rule, and in its fine clauses a hedge that had been ignored. Exceptions for life-preserving interventions may be recorded and reimbursed per emergency ledger rubric to be issued. The rubric was never issued. In its absence, a vacuum grew teeth. She circles the clause and writes "missing link" beside it. She calls the finance secretary and reads the clause back, slowly. On the line, an uncomfortable silence. The secretary admits the rubric was drafted but caught in harmonization. Bureaucracy loves safe verbs. Miriam asks for the draft by 4 o'clock and follows with an email titled Pending Legal Basis for Emergency. Exceptions, urgent. She copies the leader. And the city auditor, whose reputation for precision is a compass, in a windy place, Ibrahim, visits 3 gates in 1 hour. The biggest clinic, the registry window where death certificates wait for signatures, and the bus terminal's transit desk. He asks the same question at each door: what made you say no last week? At the registry, a clerk points to a quota chart and explains bonuses tied to zero error filings, which has become code for no-risk filings. People without paperwork must wait for the monthly amnesty day. At the terminal, a guard confesses that allowing a stranded traveler onto a night bus without payment cost him 2 days' wages when the supervisor docked him for breach of fare integrity. Perverse incentives are not poetry, they are math. Ibrahim writes in his notebook, ban penalties for life-preserving discretion. Pay the decision to help. By evening, Miriam's team has enough to publish without naming anyone who will be harmed by being brave. The city site changes its front page from stock photos to a simple board titled Door to Help. 3 numbers update every hour. Average minutes from arrival to first intervention by facility. Number of denials overturned in the last 24 hours. Complaints resolved within the service level agreement. The team writes in plain language. 48 hours for response, 5 days for resolution, with reasons posted. The public line spreads on WhatsApp, and the first calls are not insults. They're stories. A retired guard who never took a bribe describes being rewarded with ridicule for being slow, not corrupt. A young mother asks if the new rule means she can bring her asthmatic child without someone first calling her husband for approval. The city begins to realize the gate is not a wall. It is a hinge that can be oiled. The audit arm moves with careful speed. The city auditor, a woman whose calm terrifies liars, visits Ndala's glass office with a copy of the ledger page where first breath protocol is written in a leader's hand. She does not threaten. She asks to see the cash reconciliation for the previous month and the pattern of exceptions on charity days. The numbers blush. A pattern appears. Voucher sales in the evenings that cluster around one cashier's shift. Charity days where the list of beneficiaries overlaps neatly with a councilman's neighborhood. The auditor takes notes without theater. If there will be consequences, they will be legal, not performative. She prints out the finance draft that never rose and lays it next to the ledger as if to say, we are closing the gap between the paper that excuses and the paper that requires. At night, the first graph appears on the new board, a line that dips as if relief has weight. Door to help minutes at the pilot clinic fall from 21 to 8. It is not a miracle. It is the removal of a thumb from a scale. Ibrahim reads the messages that arrive late. He files the angry ones without resentment and highlights the ones that tell him where the next stuck door lives. He circles tomorrow's first stop in his notebook, the training hall. Intervention must be taught until it is boring. The exposure has named the broken mechanism. Now the city must replace it with a peace that does not grind when a human being's breath asks for room. The reform is not a speech. It is a morning of work in a room that smells of chalk and plastic chairs. Staff from clinics, registries, and transit gather with the wariness of people who have been trained to expect blame. On the front wall, a new poster hangs beside the old first aid chart. The poster's headline is humble, First Breath Protocol. Beneath it, a sentence that Awa recognizes from the ledger margin, treat first, bill later. The drill is embarrassingly simple by design. A bell rings. A clerk looks up. The first action begins. The clock starts. They practice with orange cones for patience and a kitchen timer for accountability. Adama presses the timer and finds relief in its neutrality. Time is a judge that does not scold, only measures. Ibrahim opens the session and then sits in the back, a pen in his hand but no notes to dictate. He wants to watch the culture change in small muscles. The way a guard's hand moves to open a door instead of pointing to a sign. The way a nurse meets a gaze before reaching for a form. Mariam introduces the complaint channel and the service level agreement as if describing a simple appliance. It is not a hotline for rage, but a pipeline for correction. A QR code posts on every door. It leads to a form that asks for arrival time, first help time, the name on badge if the person chooses to share, and a box for what stopped you. The QR code is taped to the counter in a way that would shame anyone who tries to peel it off. The finance secretary arrives, late, and sits quietly on the side as Mariam unveils the funding. Path that makes the rule lawful. The missing rubric is now signed and stamped. It creates a central relief fund tied to a line item that cannot be diverted without a public vote. Facilities that follow the protocol log each event in a shared database. Reimbursements flow automatically by the next day. The perverse incentive is banned with language that avoids grand gestures and uses phrases auditors love. Staff shall not be penalized for initiating life-preserving interventions prior to payment. Discretion in emergency cases will be compensated via a modest bonus reflected transparently in payroll. The secretary nods once, a small surrender. The gate is being rebuilt so that helping is not a rebellion but a job. On the city site, the dashboard now hosts 3 KPIs that update with the honesty of numbers that know they will be watched. Door to help minutes by facility, denials overturned in last 24 hours. Complaints resolved within SLA. Each facility's page lists a responsible name and a monthly culture check date when Ibrahim or the auditor will make an unannounced visit and ask, 3 questions anyone can answer without fear? What made you say yes? What almost made you say no? What changed since last month? These visits are not inspections with flashlights and whispers. They are ordinary enough to become habit, irregular enough to matter. Enforcement lives where it should. The cashier who sold vouchers in the evening is suspended pending prosecution. The councilman's patronage pipeline, carefully documented by the auditor, is referred to the ethics board that has been starving for a case to show its teeth. Ibrahim refuses to crow. He says only that justice must be quiet enough to hear the next problem. Awa declines an award and asks for more oxygen masks. Adama volunteers to train clerks in 2 other clinics on how to write the new line in the ledger with the confidence of someone who knows a supervisor will not erase it. Ndala is not fired. He is moved to oversee the reconciliation of the new relief fund. where his neatness is a virtue, and his fear can be used to protect good seams from fraying. The posters go up in Wolof and Moray and French and the street Arabic the motorboys use. A radio spot runs at dawn and dusk with a voice that sounds like the city's grandmother saying the simple rule and the simple promise: if you cannot breathe, the door opens before the bill. In the transit yard, guards practice letting a stranded traveler board with a stamped assist first slip that routes reimbursement to the social desk. In schools, the Bandage Fund is renamed First Help and funded from a small municipal pool that principals can claim against by photo and time. The reform is not heroic. It is logistics with a conscience. The city eases into it like a shoulder fits a door once the hinge has been replaced. The sound of gates changes. The breath in rooms that used to hold their air now moves, as if reminded that moving is what it was for. Months later, the dashboard's lines are almost boring. The door-to-help graph has settled into a low landscape with small hills on payday and festival days that the city now predicts and staffs for. The denials counter blips when a new clerk arrives and then evens out after a drill. Complaints read like maintenance logs rather than elegies. A QR code peeled off at the registry window and replaced within the hour. A timer battery dead and swapped by noon. A guard who asked for a cousin's approval before letting a pregnant woman through, corrected by his supervisor with a printed copy of the rule and a signed acknowledgement. Culture is made of these small signatures. It is not a hymn, it is a routine. Baba Salif returns to the roundabout, not to beg, but to sit where he knows the city's pulse. He carries a plastic chair someone donated and a folded clinic card with his name spelled right. He takes his tablets at noon and jokes that the oxygen machine taught him how to sing again. People stop to greet him, not to perform kindness, but because he has become a landmark of the city's better self. Sometimes he stands and helps a stranger cross when the motorcycles flow like a river. He speaks softly of the day the door learned his name and of the nurse who told him to breathe as if air were not a luxury. Ewa takes a morning off each week to train new aides. She begins with the timer on the table and the question that rebuilt her courage: what would you do if no one asked you for proof? Adama's handwriting has changed. It is less cramped. He can write treatment initiated, voucher pending without a tremor because the ledger now expects that line. In the reconciliation office, Ndala has become a defender of the fund he once feared. He calls facilities that lag in uploading logs not with threats but with the practiced urgency of someone who knows that delays up here become delays down there where air is measured in seconds. The audit office posts a monthly note with the tone of a weather report. Compliance at 94%. 2 facilities needed corrective visits. No evidence of Charity Day clustering. Prosecutions. 1 concluded, 1 pending. The Ethics Board, having found its voice, meets on time. The Finance Secretary speaks at a technocrats symposium about the rubric that finally existed and how a missing annex can turn into a gate that hurts. It is a dry story that prevents future harm, which is how victories should age. Ibrahim visits fewer doors. When he does, he carries no cameras. He asks 3 questions, listens to answers that are now predictable, and leaves with a thank you that lands like a stamp on a page that has already been filed. In mosques and churches and at the tea stands under neem trees, people talk about the city the way cooks talk about a recipe that finally works. It is not perfect. It is edible and repeatable and feeds more than it wastes. The first breath posters fade a little from the sun, too ordinary to inspire selfies, which is its own kind of success. The WhatsApp witness line is quiet enough that Miriam considers moving it to a monthly digest. She does not. Vigilance enjoys rhythm. The market women still arrange tomatoes like a disciplined sunset, but their gossip has found new subjects. A bus driver who pulled over to help an old man adjust his mask. A registrar who walked out from behind the glass to explain a form instead of pointing with a pen. The gate motif lingers, but without menace. Doors open more easily because hinges are oiled on schedule and because the people who hold them understand why they hold them. A breath is no longer a siren. It is the baseline. The city's pride is not loud. It is the sight of a child watching a nurse put a mask on a stranger without asking for a card, and then looking away because such things are normal. Ibrahim's notebook fills slower. On its last page for the year, a sentence sits alone. Habit is the highest policy. He underlines it once and closes the book. The ledger in the pilot clinic is on its 3rd volume. On the inside cover, Adama has written in his tidy hand a story that does not brag. Nobody helped the old beggar until Ibrahim arrived. Then the rule learned its job, and the door remembered it was built for breathing. Thanks for walking with us through this story. If something here moved you, or simply made you breathe a little easier, stay with the work and help it travel. If you like the video, then like, share, comment, and subscribe. Your voice keeps the gate open for the next story we need to tell.